Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Clinical Trial Podcast. I'm your host, Kunal Sampat, and my job is to help you accelerate your clinical research career. Today's episode is about something that frustrates a lot of people in the field of clinical research: the job search. Specifically, why qualified candidates apply for role after role and never hear back. Instead of guessing what's going wrong, I wanted to get straight to the source, someone who actually sits on the other side of those hiring decisions. Because here's what most people don't realize: getting hired isn't about your technical skills, it's about how hiring managers assess risks, how recruiters decide who to champion for, and what signals actually get attention versus what quietly gets ignored. My guest today is Giovanni Lauricella, CEO and co-founder of Lifeblood, an executive search firm for specializing in MedTech. Giovanni brings over 15 years of experience placing board members, C-suite leaders, and cross-functional talent across North America, Europe, and beyond. He's also a board member, investor, and operator in the space, which means he understands how hiring decisions get made at every level in the organization. In this conversation, we pull back the curtain on why strong candidates get filtered out before they ever reach an interview, why hiring managers are actually looking, what hiring managers are actually looking for, and it's probably not what you think, how recruiters decide who to advocate for, and what it really takes to break into an advance within clinical research. If you've ever felt stuck in the job search or wondered why the process feels like a black box, this episode will give you a much clearer picture of what's really going on. Please join me in welcoming Giovanni on the Clinical Trial Podcast.
Great clinical research professionals aren't born, they're built. In each episode, hear from leading experts in clinical trial management as they inspire and motivate you to become an effective leader. Welcome to the Clinical Trial Podcast. Here to help you accelerate your career is your host, Kunal Sampat.
Okay. Hi, Giovanni. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Clinical Trial Podcast. It's my honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, Kunal. I appreciate you having me.
So I think we have a jam-packed conversation today planned for, job seekers and also people looking to hire talent. So I'm really excited to lean on your expertise and you bring decades of experience working in the MedTech sector. So I think you'll be, I think people are in for a treat. So thank you. I think to kind of set stage for this conversation, I kind of want to I want to do like a reality check for people, like candidates that are looking for opportunities as we go through this from a hiring manager's perspective. I think a lot of times like we were thinking about I want this job, or the hiring manager's like, I want to secure this, a specific type of a person. But I feel like sometimes candidates might be thinking they might be overreaching, or they might not be may not have the skill sets or the expertise that they believe they do. So I kind of wanted to take a step back, see what see from the lens from the hiring manager's perspective. So my first question was, how quickly are candidates really evaluated once they enter the hiring process? What typically disqualifies someone from before an interview even begins or happens?
So I say regularly, the interview is the interview process. And we've validated that numerous times, where it is the little human behavior things, and not always, but we have had candidates be removed from the process that has nothing to do with skill sets, that has nothing to do with technical attributes. They might not have sent a follow-up note after the interview expressing gratitude for the time and the opportunity of pursuing this position. And it's that little simple follow-up and gratitude aspect. Or it was in their email communications, just lack of detail orientation, and they use shorthand and abbreviations and come off as very informal / unprofessional. It is not respecting time. So if you're going to be late, first and foremost, don't be late. And if you are late for something wildly out of your control because you don't take on the belief of, if you're 5 minutes early, you're on time, and if you're on time, you're late. If that's not your mentality, and for some reason you are now 10 minutes late to your interview, and you haven't reached out and let someone know that you're in bumper to bumper traffic because there's an accident that you couldn't control. Like, if you're not doing that and you're showing up to an interview late, which it happens. We actually just had that. We were doing an electrical engineering director position. He was by far the top candidate. He showed up late to his interview, and the hiring manager just couldn't get it out of his head. If this is how this awesome person on paper and over the phone call, technically speaking, might end up living his personal / professional life in terms of professionalism and personal behavior. And so he just removed him from the process. So there's a lot of small things that I could continue going on, but I think in the fast-moving culture that we all have going on right now, where we're driving and looking at our phones and sending a text message, and we are listening to music at the same time, and everything is just fast, 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 we've lost the professionalism in interview processes. We try to show up late in business casual clothes rather than wearing suit and ties. And I know sometimes, whole cultures have diluted that out, but there's a lot of professionalism lost. And when you are a hiring manager, oddly enough, that's when you really focus on professionalism. But candidates have seemed to gotten a little bit lazy.
Thank you for saying that. Absolutely. I think it still matters to dress for success, I should say, and being on time. And those are the fundamentals that go beyond your skill sets, and kind of really making sure you don't slip on the courteous messages, after the interview, and showing gratitude. So thank you for sharing those. So
Absolutely.
I want to next touch on, like, when is a recruiter candidate relationship actually a good fit? Maybe I think let's start there.
And I mean this with all due respect for my profession. I will tell you, there's a general lack of respect for recruiters, and I think that's also part of the industry, how it's built itself up. You don't have to have a medical degree or a law degree or a PhD to become a recruiter. You could hang up right now and become a recruiter if you wanted to. So the barrier of entry is very, very low, and there is a lot of unfortunate people who do enter this industry who just think it's a quick buck, and they themselves are not overly professional with hyper communication. They lose the sight that all that we do is facilitate communication and making sure that T's are crossed, I's are dotted, things don't fall between the cracks, time is managed, expectations are managed, and that's all very high touch point communication. And so when a recruiter reaches out to somebody and takes their time, but then doesn't follow up, or at a minimum close a loop, delivering both good or bad information, candidates themselves get jaded against unprofessional recruiters, which I think then manifests that it's almost like a stereotype or maybe cliche where they jump on a phone and they just think that it's not going to be a great relationship until you meet that really great relationship of a recruiter that might even turn into being a friend. But it's someone who you can trust. It's someone who you can talk to openly, who you actually believe and trust, and actually have your career be led by at times, making crucial decisions. Because what I have always taken significant responsibility as is like, okay, buying a car, a house, a boat, sending your children to school. These are all very, very big financial decisions. I control recruitment processes that facilitate people to get a position or a job that pays them, that they can then go buy those things. So in theory, making a career decision is one of the most biggest or big decisions of your life. And recruiters should have a respect for that process. Some of them do, and those are good recruiters, and candidates should recognize that when they do meet a good recruiter. It's very unfortunate that there's actually a lot of recruiters who aren't great recruiters, which then, because of the low barrier of entry, kind of dilute the whole sentiment around our industry. But once you do find that good recruiter, ask good questions, trust them, and then enable them by being transparent and having them actually help guide you through a process. Don't hold
Yeah,
back, and certainly don't lie, because if they're brokering your deal, that could actually blow up. I've had that happen before where I thought I had a good relationship. Someone blatantly lied to me. I tried to broker their deal for them, and the whole thing blew up because I had misinformation.
I want to touch on, like, I want to tell you a little story, and I think we'll get into this, but, maybe we'll start with the don't lie piece, because I actually had a very bad experience with the recruiter. Well, maybe I shouldn't say very bad, because I think I did end up getting the job, but I do think my being transparent actually worked against me, maybe. Because what that person did is, I think because recruiters work primarily for the hiring manager and their organization, and they get compensated through them. And I trusted this person, and I shared like how much money I was making, and including like my whole total compensation. And I think the next thing they did turn around is like forward that spreadsheet to the hiring manager, and that kind of broke my trust in the process. But it actually got worse. This person ended up, we don't have to talk about this forever, but they promised me like sign-on bonus, or I was trying to negotiate a sign-on bonus, and they're like, you know what, don't ask the company for a sign-on bonus. I'll give you like money outside the deal, like outside. Once you get the job, I'll send you a check in 30 days or something. 30 days turned into 6 months. That turned into 2 years, and I never got that check. And guess what I had to do? I had to contact like my lawyer and get some advice. And I ended up telling this recruiter like, hey, I'm submitting a small court dispute, for you not honoring your part of the bargain, because I had all these communications with him about the sign-on bonus piece. And he said, I'm sending it to you. Never did. And obviously then I think that got him going. I sent him a copy of the form I was going to submit to the court, and then he literally like sent the check the next day for $8,000. It was wild. I hope I never have to go through that painful experience again. And I think those are the bad recruiters that you're talking about. I feel like they just get in the profession, and then they try to do all these shady things.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone listening in on that, I would I've never even done anything close like that. I mean, there should be only one check being sent, and that is actually to a recruiter, and that is when that recruiter succeeds in hiring that person for the company that retained them to do so. Anything that's wheeling, dealing outside and making this a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, I would just stop. Like, that would not be a process that I would even entertain, nor even a discussion I would entertain. And then I think going on to a larger conversation is just really more about the concept of, there are aspects and times where it's actually quite good to be financially transparent. And I think when you're financially transparent with a good recruiter that knows what to do with that, that's where everyone wins. Everyone wins. And what does that really mean? Like, when both sides win in a deal, it doesn't mean anyone feels like they got the best deal of their life. It means it actually feels fair. I know that I am running a business. I have to spend money in order to grow my business. This is a little bit more than I had in mind, but I know I feel good that it was a good value. I didn't get it cheap, and I didn't feel like I was raked over the coals and I spent way too much where it's uncomfortable. I'm going to resent the person the day they show up. On the flip side, for candidates, and I don't know if it's a book that they read or a blog that's been sent out or whatever, but holding back complete financial transparency, and let's just throw out a number. If you make $150,000 at your current position and you're interviewing for a job and you're pushing for a $210,000 base from a $150,000 base, it's just greed. That's not market value. Something's going to happen. This whole concept, I mean, there's a couple states, and maybe even more by this point, but there was a massive change in the United States, in the recruitment world specifically, in 2017, when Massachusetts and California passed a law that employers can't ask candidates what they're actually making, because it was trying to add for equality, et cetera. there has been plenty of papers, plenty of studies, plenty of data out there that how bad that has backfired, especially in the high tech industry where students are coming out of college in software development, et cetera, and making $500,000. And there's many more extrapolated examples that just dilute the concept of what is market at this point. And then it becomes very, very challenging as a leader and a manager for keeping, I wouldn't say pay bands, but like if you have 4 mechanical engineers and one makes 120,000, one makes 70,000, one makes 185,000, it's going to happen. That's going to lead to turnover because people talk eventually, no matter how many laws and regulations and policies are out there. And so this whole concept of if you're going to make a move, there's something that's the typical 10% bump up, like that's what you're kind of looking for. But if you're working for a medical device, a MedTech product-based company, and you're taking one career move and going to the next, I would say it's more than a grain of salt, but jumping 50%, 30%, 100%, it's unrealistic. Sometimes, and there's plenty of people who have done it happily, where they might take a back step for more equity, but they take a back step financially for a company and a product that they still really believe in. There's some things that don't financially just have to be in this gridded box, and that there is still an emotional component to it as long as your Maslow's hierarchy of needs is met from a income perspective. So it just depends on how you negotiate, but usually there's a gut feeling where, like, if candidates, or for that matter, companies, are angling and pushing too hard because they want to win, it's only a matter of time before something happens, either in that process or after they're employed, that it's not going to pan out for the long run.
I love it. Yeah, I 1,000% wholeheartedly agree with what you just shared. And I think the equity piece is really important because I feel like I was working for a big company. I never worked for a startup. And I think not understanding the mechanics and what the upside would be with the equity. And I know there is that risk, but obviously if you're going to work for a startup, you know that there is inherent risk in doing that, right? You're supposed to go in with the mindset of, like, you believe in the product, the people, and the therapy, right? And hence you're making that jump.
And especially, for example, in very expensive states, and I'm just using and picking on these right now, in California and Massachusetts, right? Taxes are high, cost of living is high, right? When you're thinking about joining a small to medium-sized company, not a big corporation, but a small to medium-sized company, that equity is a component of. You literally have to look at the whole package. Are you going from a director to a senior director? Are you going from a director to a head of clinical affairs? Are you going from a head of clinical affairs to a VP of clinical affairs? Is it career progression? Is it compensation progression? Is it an opportunity to be part of an incredible technology that's going to grow your career pending the success of the company? You have to look whole. Is it shaving off a half hour of your commute every morning, where you get more time with your family, et cetera? This is a whole compensation, or a whole package of compensation that you have to look at, because if you're going to walk away from something that you actually are really interested in for a 5,000 or 7,500 or 10,000 discrepancy, well, if you live in Massachusetts, or if you live in California, for example, and you start doing the math on like what 10,000 truly means, on what that actually is hitting your bank account after you pay your taxes, and then you amortize that out on a weekly basis, you're walking away from a dream job for a couple $100 a week.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? That's how, and you have to be on board with that philosophy. I mean, I can create and tell you and share the philosophy, but there is an element of happiness and being happy in your career that is still very human, and not just, and I hear it all the time as a recruiter. Yes, we all want to grow our careers. Yes, we all want to make more money because we think we want more money. We think we know we need more money. There's plenty of studies about that within itself. And also, are you ever going to be a billionaire being a director of clinical affairs for a company? You're not. So there's a level of like rationalism that goes into this. And there are plenty of people I mean, I just talked to a candidate yesterday, and a good friend of mine who I've known for a long time. She lasted 1 year at a company. She literally just couldn't, every time she opened the front door, her stomach would churn. She just couldn't handle it anymore. She just didn't want to be there anymore. And it didn't matter. And she was the highest paid she's ever been paid in her career. And it was no longer about the money. It was just about, do I actually like doing what I'm doing anymore? And there's still a very human element to professionalism.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Um, so, if you had 10 strong candidates and time to help only two, how would you decide who gets your attention?
It's an excellent question. So these are 10 candidates in a process that
In the
a
pro,
sing,
yeah,
in a singular interview process
yeah, exactly. Yep.
ish.
Yes.
So at that point, who would get my attention is either the two candidates that my client is interested in, that I'm now having to go deep down to the bottom of the ocean to figure out if they're the right people or not, or the candidates that I believe are good candidates for the process that I need to go down to the bottom of the ocean to then build a case to my client as to why they're the right candidates. Though that's the only two buckets it would fall into.
Yeah. So, my guess is you want to curate that list before you send it to your client. You don't want to send them 10 resumes or 10 profiles. Or what's the approach you would take?
It depends. So we're very big on calibration. So a lot of what we do, and I can basically say all that we do, is work for venture-backed medical device companies. So we don't work for the big corporations. We work for those, call it small to medium-sized organizations that typically have venture capital backing. Um, and with that, running those companies is a full-time sprint, day in and day out. And the reason why they ultimately use recruiters as well is also a time savings aspect. It's someone who's professionally doing this that can deliver the data that they need to make game time decisions. It's about speed. It's about being expeditious in terms of hiring somebody for their team, because time is money when you're not generating revenue. And so the concept there is um, when you're handing over candidates, there's a calibration process that we go through where they think they need this. They typically have limited hiring experience because the team might be 2 people, 5 people, 20 people. It's still not hiring 20 people a month for 16 years. And so the concept of calibration is, if we share 10 profiles around what this theoretical profile is that we started off with, where we go into the market and source what we call the horseshoe effect, close enough, the cold, medium, hot against that theoretical profile that we initially created together. We show them what that is, because they might think that they need a head of commercialization or a director of clinical. But then we show them what directors of clinical or heads of commercialization cost. And maybe with that cost, even though it's the right talent that they're looking for, the cost is just too high and they don't have the budget for it no matter how hard they try. And so now they have to figure out, where are they going to make concessions? And then now we have to go out and find optimized talent that might be a little bit more junior, for example, and then fitting those budgets or whatever have you. So we go through a calibration process where it's not like we disappear for 2 weeks to a month and we come back with 3 candidates and we say, you have to choose one and here's my recommendation. Our job, we believe, is to go out with what our client thinks they want to solve their business problem. And we certainly do a lot of talking on the businesses, because we've built a lot of businesses from a talent perspective. So we can give a lot of insight as to, okay, this is your operational challenge. This is likely what you need. Let's go out and source an array of candidates that are close to that. Let's show you how much they cost in the market. Let's show you what their taste is for equity. Let's show you, is this going to have to be a relocation? Is this going to have to be a hybrid? Do you care if this person comes into the office or is a complete remote? All of these softer and more technical questions are answered. And then once we look at real human beings who are actually genuinely interested in the opportunity, then we can start calibrating and dialing it in, so that we might even have real good candidates in the first tranche, But from there, now we have a calibrated profile that we can actually go out and then deliver spot on candidates, mitigating the LinkedIn posting effect of 400 resumes. You might have, 8 that you have to look at initially, and then after that, it might only go up to 14 in total, but the last 6 were really strong.
Right. Got it. Okay. So you'd lean on that calibration process, like, and then it would help decide which tool you would want to continue working with.
Yeah, and I mean, in the 16 years I've been doing this, there's always been like a phrase that we throw out, or a line that we throw out, where it's like, you can't take a human being and fit them into a profile position description. You have to amend the profile and the position description around a human being that you ultimately land on. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you go out with a theoretical position description or a profile in your mind that you want to bring onto your team, I want someone in the office 5 days a week. I want 180,000 at the top end of my budget. I want them to have first in human experience, post-market experience, and pivotal trial experience. I need them to accept a senior director title or less. I can't give heads of or VPs for whatever reason because my board won't let me. You come up with all these constraints,
Things. Yeah.
and then you go out and you source candidates that are senior clinical manager through VP of clinical. And then you see, what is the cost structure of that? Well, if senior managers are still getting paid 185 grand, I think we have a huge challenge ahead of us, right? Because that means we're way off budget. So what do we really have to do to make sure that this is going to be worthwhile for everyone's time, candidates and my clients? So we have to go through that calibration process, because a majority of the fact is, when you're running a company and you're running a team, yes, you have made hires before throughout your career, maybe many hires, relatively speaking, but you haven't made thousands of hires. You haven't made hundreds of hires. When you dial in that algorithm in your head from hiring thousands of times, you can smell what's going to happen. You can feel what's going to happen. You can understand how to drive a process cleaner. And so the point is like, it's very acceptable and rational and actually quite optimal to understand that hiring managers don't actually have a lot of experience hiring. They have a lot of experience doing what they functionally are supposed to do. Hiring
Right.
is supposed to come only when they need it. After that, they do their operational business. So you have to allow them to say, okay, this is what I think I need. Well, let's go find real human beings close enough so that we can understand, is that really rational? And that's the calibration phase.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, so what makes a recruiter excited to advocate for someone versus quietly passing?
That's human motivation 101. It's an amazing question. It couldn't be more timely. We were doing an executive chair position, an executive chairman position for a company, and we were down to 3 phenomenal candidates. On paper, all of them were rock stars. They came with their own flavor, but they were all rock stars. And 2 of them were hyper communicative with us, the recruiters. Very, very communicative, very gracious. If we ask questions, and you're talking very well accomplished people, they would give us answers, allowing us to move the process forward. They trusted us. It was like cutting warm butter. It was just very smooth and easy. And that's where the professionalism comes in. And then we had one candidate who went on for a final interview and said, you can forget those Lifeblood guys. Let's just talk together and negotiate and figure this out together. I think we're done with them. Our client stood up and said, I think we're done here. If that's how you do things, what else is the way that you do things that aren't really professional or above board? And when you have candidates who, once again, going back to our earlier conversation, if you find a good recruiter and you develop a relationship with that recruiter, it has to be like a friendship, like any other good thing in life. You got to respect it and allow us to be professional. So how do you work with a good recruiter? It's good communication. It's respect for the profession. It's the trust that this person is going to have your best interests of developing your career, both for killing the deal, and I've done that countless times. I have looked at people because where I sit as a third party, right? You have to think like I have a fiduciary responsibility to my client to ultimately deliver and fill the role that they want filled, that they've hired me for. But in order for me to get hired, I have to be perceived as having a network, which has taken me years to build. In that network, there's also varying arrays of relationships. Some are much stronger than others. But also, you have to play the long game as a recruiter, too. Like, if I know that my client is not a good fit for a candidate that I've known for years, months, or is a really great relationship and a respectful person, and you can tell it's just a genuine relationship that's blossoming because maybe I might have just met them for the first time in this process. I have killed the deal where I'd be like, listen, I know I recruited you for this. I just found something out after they got out of a board meeting, or I just found how their philosophy is approaching this. Honestly, I just don't think this is the right one for you. I can't guarantee I'm going to circle back with you in a week with another opportunity, but I'm letting you know here's the reason why, but I don't think this is a good position for you. I think this is going to be more of a liability for you. And I have told candidates about my clients that this is not a right fit for them. And it doesn't mean that it's not a right fit for somebody else. But you have to have, where I sit as that third party, I have to have respect for my network and I have to have respect for my clients and making sure that we're ultimately finding the right person for the right position.
Makes sense. Um, that segues like nicely into the next question. So, what signals actually reduce hiring risks for like clinical research roles? Um, what do candidates massively overvalue when trying to break in?
Well, I can tell you, especially for the small to medium-sized venture-backed companies, first in human experience is very, very huge. If you have that, that's a great card to have in your back pocket. Um, the ability to understand how to properly lead, and also even before that, select the right clinical or contract research organization. If you have those relationships, if for some reason you're not going to build a full in-house team, that's also very helpful. Um, when you start getting into bigger companies, and I mean that even from a medium size and onwards, when you start getting into post-market, there's a lot of candidates and clinical professionals out there who have excellent product experience, but when you look at what they do, 90+% of their experience, if not all sometimes, is post-market studies. And that's fine in big companies that are constantly doing iterative studies for their devices and doing that for post-market clinical marketing research and et cetera. But when you want to get into novel innovation and be a head of clinical affairs for an upcoming startup company that's just getting involved into their pivotal trial because they got IDE approval, or going into first in human, having that pre-approved clinical experience, whether it's first in human or pivotal trial study design, is crucial. The other thing for both candidates and how they present themselves in interviews, which will come back to bite them if they don't get out in front of it themselves, is to be transparent and honest with what they've been a part of. So just because on your resume you've been involved in 3 pivotal trials, what did you actually contribute to that pivotal trial? Because if it was a part of a team, which is nothing wrong with that, but if you take this persona as though you led the strategy and hardcore execution decisions for the pivotal trial, and you put yourself into a venture capital backed company as the lead that's supposed to set the strategy and do the clinical SOPs and identify the site, and you have no real experience with that because other teammates of yours did that, but you quote unquote were on that PMA trial, that is a short road to nowhere and eventually will come out. So what I would strongly say is be quite honest in an interview process about your direct contributions and also what you want to do.
Right. I think thank you for saying that. Yeah, when I'm like talking to like students at San Jose State, for example, I'll tell them like on their resume, they have to say exactly what their contributions were, like not generic job description sentences. Like, did you like lead this, or were you directly responsible for getting, enrollment completed in a clinical trial, or like what was exactly your role and your contributions? And I think being precise, it matters even more with, like you said, like, medium-sized companies or early, venture-backed startups.
1000%, because everything becomes very, very tangible and real the smaller the company is, because there's nowhere to hide at all. And so if you're way over your head, your employment's not going to last very long because you're not going to be able to deliver. And so
Right.
having that transparency, and that's why I also say not only transparency in what you've actually done,
Right.
but coupled with your ambitions for also what you would like to do. Because
Right.
sometimes cash strapped venture backed companies, they can't afford somebody who's done it 3 times and their base salary is 320,000. They get a 30% bonus on top of that plus equity or whatever it may be. Um,
Right.
and so you want to go out there and say, listen, like, I have the resources, I have the network, and if I don't, I know how to ask. This is what I'm looking for in my career. This is what I'm looking to grow into. But this is factually what I've done. I've seen others do what I haven't done yet. I think I have more than enough resources to figure out how to go about doing it. But I'm going to be honest with you, I have not done that factually. If you could be that direct and transparent, the amount of times I've heard the other side after the interview from my clients say the fact that they were that brutally honest and direct with me um, shows me their character, and that's someone who I can work with and grow with. And oftentimes that's the person that ultimately gets selected.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. So if you had to rank like five hiring signals, and everything else kind of didn't matter, what what would those be? Can you rank those? I think you mentioned some of those as we were talking through this, but I want to see if you can rank those.
So rank hiring
The,
decisions
yeah, hiring decisions. Yeah, exactly.
from a hiring manager's perspective. I'm like, why they would want to hire somebody.
Yep.
So first and foremost, I mean, let's just, if we be honest with each other, like what gets hiring managers' attention out of the gate, it's an interesting candidate on paper, right? Or someone who's introduced to them through a relationship saying this is the person that you should talk to. But whatever initially gets that awareness factor, so having a good resume, an appropriate resume, that just gets the awareness factor going to start a process of discussion. Um, After that, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, being the interview is the interview process. It is how communicative you are, how much interest you show. And that's something I haven't touched base on yet. And there's actually, I would probably say about a third of my clients, I'll use that cliche term, over index on, I want to know why somebody wants to join my company. Someone wants to be on my team. I don't want to feel like this candidate is in 5 or 6 different interview processes and we're just another company that they're interviewing with and it's just another day in their life, and like we should either A, be lucky to get them, or B, like it's just a sterile situation. I want that person to tell me why they actually want to be here. So expressing that, so good communication, expressing interest, and showing why they actually want or envision their career to be with that company. Um, the professionalism of everything that we talked about, that's kind of like all wrapped up in one: showing up on time, dressing professionally, um, bringing copies of your resume or sending them ahead of time, like all these little old school tips and tricks and T's to cross and I's to dot that just leave questions answered, I should say, like
Right.
before,
Right.
ahead of time, where someone's not trying to tease it out of you. And then questions. I mean, I don't know if there's anything worse that just kills the energy and the mojo of a really great interview than when a
Mhm.
hiring manager looks back at a candidate and says, so do you have any questions for us? And they say, No, I think I'm good. That's not good. Even if you have had a lot of your questions answered, there's always more that you can keep on asking. So I don't know if I gave you them in perfect chronological order, but those are the things that I would rank them in terms of how you should go about them. I mean, keep in mind the resume or the handshake of someone introducing you to someone based on a relationship. That is just literally to create awareness. Once the awareness is created and someone wants to enter, meaning a hiring manager wants to enter into an interview process with you, that's where the game starts. And the only thing I can concretely say is old school is still the very new school. It's good
Right.
human behavior. It's good eye contact. It's just being professional. We are not, and I hope to say we'll never be at a place where it's very acceptable to hire unprofessional people.
Sure. That's great. Thank you for sharing. So, I want to talk about like no experienced candidates. Do they actually ever get hired? And when people say they don't have any experience, what do they actually mean?
It's a good question. Uh, from a recruiter standpoint, if I could start there, it's challenging with people who are starting their careers with no solid career track record. Because if you think about how the supply chain of a recruiter exists, there's a company that has a need for skill sets and talent and a body at a minimum on their team. If they hire a recruiter, they're tasking that recruiter to find specific skill sets and weed them out so that they can deliver culture driven good candidates that have the skill sets that are being requested. That's about as easy as I can make it. If there's nothing to go off of because you have a degree and that's about it. Um, and what I mean by that is you might have been in clubs and you might have done extracurriculars and you might have written a book and you might have done internships and all. It is not industry experience. And if you're not able to be, there's no other way to say it. If you're not able to be judged based on your industry experience, there's no real way for it to be a credible recruitment process. So, typically speaking, you won't find recruiters uh, actively working with candidates who are coming fresh out of college or university settings because there's no function to be able to warrant a commission based structure for a recruiter to go out and find somebody who's not capable of, in the pejorative sense, being judged based on their skill sets of what they can bring to the table. Are students or early career professionals or want to be professionals getting hired? I mean, they have to be, right? Everyone eventually gets a job. Um, there's a lot of ways that can happen. First and foremost, the larger companies have much more mature programs to bring students in. Um, so a lot of the times you'll see people go into larger companies right out of school just because they have the tolerance, the patience, the budgets, and um, the need for growing people internally and investing in people without uh, the skill sets that are required out of the gate, but maybe they come from the schools that they're affiliated with in terms of internship programs or career programs. So there's that. Then there's other ones. I mean, I've seen plenty of people walk right out of college and go right into a startup company. How does that happen? The good old school way of I knew somebody and someone was willing to take a trust factor. That's not really recruitable. That's a, dare I say, lucky, but it's just based on like my uncle used to work at this place and he knew that guy who knew that woman who owns this company and they got me an interview and they just liked me. So the question on no experienced or early stage career or students entering the workforce question, there's plenty of ways to skin the cat, but it's not a true recruitable aspect of how career development happens.
Yeah, totally. I'm not sure if you'll be able to comment on this, but what causes someone to be labeled like non-promotable? So when people like are trying to move between like early career to mid manager and mid manager to like executive? Like, what point like you're like they kind of cannot be promoted?
The simple answer there is they don't go above and beyond. They don't express ambition. They're not a good team player. They don't vocalize what they actually want. I mean, the cliche saying, "A closed mouth goes unfed." If you show up to your position every single day and you're not asking for where you want to drive your career, you're not always going to get it the day that you ask or the month that you ask. But if you're enabling those who are leading you to understand that you want to grow, I will tell you, every hiring manager in the world fears losing their team. And the moment that their team members tell them that they have ambitions, that they want to grow, that is the immediate understanding that that person won't be where they are in this moment forever, and they're not going to be complacent forever. So you may not have the ability to promote them or pay them more or whatever it may right now, but the clock just started ticking for you to figure it out.
Absolutely. Um, what fundamentally changes when when you're hiring for like senior executive roles? So why do like strong mid performers fail to make the leap to the C suite?
There's a couple different ways I can understand that question. Uh, First and foremost, it's a triangle or a pyramid. There's simply fewer positions or availability at the top, which is some of these cliche terms of like, I have to wait for someone to die for me to get that position. So it's a it's if there's no way to move up because people are actively in that position and they're not expressing any timelines or interest to vacate those positions, um, that's a challenge, right? It's simply supply and demand. If there are, for some reason, opportunities presenting themselves in the C-suite or the executive level, and these middle managers aren't getting promoted there, it's kind of back to what we were just talking about as to what would preclude somebody from getting promoted or being seen as promotable. Um,
Right.
Once again, doing your job is not warranting a promotion. Going above and beyond is expressing eagerness, ambition, and desire to grow. No one as a hiring manager or a leader feels obligated to look at somebody who's doing the bare minimum of what they're hired for and saying, you know what, today's the day I'm just going to give them more and hopefully they grow into it.
Yep. Absolutely. Um, I want to dig a little deeper into the equity and stock options. If you can maybe comment on this, it's a bit confusing, especially for somebody who's never like uh, worked at a startup before and kind of has the experience, and now they're taking on a new role. Um, from an hiring and negotiation standpoint, how should they think about how should candidates think about equity, especially for early stage and MedTech companies? Um, was it like you said we were talking about earlier? It's like a balancing act, right? There's too many factors, and you know, the, the the startups might be cash strapped, and maybe they're offering equity, but how do you kind of make sense of it? For example, what I did is I called like a, there was a director at Abbott that I had known for a long time, and then he had joined a startup, worked at a startup for 5 years, and then that startup had failed, and then he joined another startup, and that startup has flourished. And I basically called him and I said, hey, can you guide me on how to think about this? And then he's like, yeah, you want to try to make your I guess you don't want to dilute your shares every time there's a new round of fundraising. But that was his advice, and I pitched that to the CEO of this company I was going to work at, and she's like, no, there's no way we're going to agree to that, because even for her, she's like, even my stock gets diluted when we do a fresh round of fundraising. But anyways, I just wanted to see if there's other angles you want to take this question from, for equity in stock.
There's a lot there. I hope I can remember all the points I want to make.
Yeah,
So,
no problem.
this can be very, very simply put. Unless you're a founder of a company, The general rule of thumb when you join a company that's offering equity is it's round about 1 year of cash compensation if there's an exit. This whole notion of what they say in Netflix and the movies of, living the high life and a company goes through an exit and you become a multimillionaire, it is not real. It is just not real. There's very, very few exceptions. Like, for example, Inari Medical, who went public in 2020 and was recently acquired by Stryker, if you were well beyond the founding team and joined within the first, call it 7 years of the company, you did very well. But that is a unique case. Inari Medical, for example, was the company that broke the record for the largest revenue in their first year of commercialization for a privately held company at $55 million. So it's just unique. If we look at general rule of thumbs on equity, this whole concept of like you're going to join an implantable gastroenterology company as their director of clinical, and if that company gets sold, you're going to walk away with $25 million and never have to work again. That story was never told. It was just never told. So the general rule of thumb is your equity allocation, typically speaking, there will be exceptions, is roughly 1 year of cash compensation. That's the easiest way of thinking about it.
Is that over the 4-year cliff, or is that over just for that? I'm trying to understand.
For example, like if a company gets acquired,
200K. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're making 200K and you come in and you got 0.3% of the company, right? And there's 3 different ways of being able to represent equity. It's actually the cash value today. It is the number of shares, or it's the percentage of the company. For simplicity, let's use the percentage of the company. If you're getting 0.35 or 0.7, coming in as a director of clinical, you're not getting 3% of a company. That's just not how it works in the real world. So and you're getting paid $200,000. If the company sells, you might get 200, you might get 425, you might get 375, you might get 160. There's so many business variables that are so far out of your control if you're in the clinical affairs department, beyond just delivering on that oil, which is the data of every company. That's really how you should sleep at night. And I have unfortunately lost on paper what was really, really great candidates who just refused to wrap their mind around this whole equity thing, and they wanted it to make sense. They really wanted to understand what it truly meant. And the other thing that I wanted to make sure I mentioned is you can't. Anything that is not commercialized, the valuation is not real. It is perceived. All of these analysts, all of these venture capitalists that do their diligence, it is not real. Obviously, it is real enough for a syndicate of investors to agree upon a valuation, but it doesn't mean that it's real. Right now, we have been in a 3-year period of very challenging time for MedTech to raise capital. The amount of what we call down rounds, meaning the next round that they raise is actually on a valuation that was lower than the previous round that they raised on, that's a real thing. So this whole concept of valuing something that doesn't have revenue tied to it, which then makes a company's value black and white. If a company's generating $2 million a year in revenue, well, that's a variable that you can dictate, whether it's future projections or what the company's valued right now on 3 years earnings. Like, that is how you can actually do valuations. Anything that doesn't have value, I mean, yes, of course, you might have equipment. Yes, you might have personnel. You might have IP. But going in there when someone's saying, like, we just raised on a post-money valuation of $212 million. Well, you might have some machines, you might have a building, you might have 10 people. Like, it doesn't mean it's really worth 212 million. Someone just made that up, and there's a bunch of investors that got on board with that. And now the amount of equity that's being able to put into an employee stock option pool has a valuation that's given to you, but it's all not factually real. It's a valuation. So the concept here is, if you can digest the cash compensation of an offer letter, you can rationalize that, plus or minus just a little bit. Your equity allocation is roughly about a year's compensation. You're not going in there thinking that you're going to be a 10 millionaire in 3 years from now. And you don't have to make the numbers make sense, meaning like, what does 112,000 shares really, really mean based on this strike price?
Yep.
That's the philosophy. People overthink it, people overwork it, and ultimately it costs a lot of people positions because they don't understand it. Hence the fact that if they don't adopt a philosophy of everything else is good enough, I am going to have equity, and if we do exit, I'll roughly have a year's plus worth of salary. If that's not good enough, then usually the deal falls apart.
Yeah. So if you exit, you'll have a year's worth of salary, right? That's kind of what you're saying from the stock the equity you get, right? And then that
Yes.
timeline, do you feel like it's 4 years or 1 year, or like say if I take a job, I'm trying to leave in a year, I guess it would be a fourth of the 1 year's salary, or would it be the full year's salary?
So
I'm trying to,
the
sorry.
boilerplate,
Go
the
ahead.
boilerplate equity vesting schedule of a medical device company is a 1 year cliff. So what is that? A 1 year cliff and a 4 year vest. So what does that mean? If you're given 1% of the company, if you decide to leave the company within 6 months of joining, you get nothing. So that first year cliff means you do not actually vest on any of your equity until you hit your 1 year mark. Upon being there 1 year, 25% of a 4 year vest will vest. So then you will have vested 0.25% of your 1%.
I see.
Moving forward thereafter that, more often than not, it is a monthly vest every single month, a percentage that yields 25% of your 4 year vest. So every year it's 25%, but you start a monthly vesting schedule after month 12. And so anytime you leave before that 4 year marker, vesting at 100% of what you've been given over that 4 years, you are keeping in terms of vesting. And by the way, these are options, right? So these are options to buy. It doesn't mean that you factually own the company. So if the company were to sell, or actually if you leave, you typically have 90 days if you actually want to buy your options in that company, if you believe that company for exiting for whatever reason.
Right. Thank you for explaining that very clearly. So who should not pursue like a long-term career in maybe clinical research with CRO sponsors, MedTech, even if they're capable on paper? What would you tell someone who wants to advance faster than their peers and is not willing to do the uncomfortable work?
Biggest thing on that one that we personally see is just an easy answer from my side is travel, the component of traveling. So clinical, especially when you're getting involved into first in human and more specifically early feasibility study and pivotal trials that require large amounts of enrollment and patients and sites, you're on a plane 50 to 75 to 80%. If you have ambitions of having your first child, multiple children, you want to be close to them at all times, and you don't want to be living on a plane 60, 70, 80% of the time, clinical affairs is not for you. If it's an in-house position, if you're a clinical research associate, CRA, if you're doing documentation for clinical trials and it requires no travel, like, okay, that's clinical research, but it's an in-house clinical role. If you're out there designing trials, wanting to design trials, wanting to help enroll patients, working with the PIs and the physicians on patient enrollment, site enrollment, going to the conferences, it involves travel. And so a huge thing where that just is where someone is in their life and in their career. I have seen plenty of great pieces of paper and resumes of people who were just not in the right period of their life where they did not want to sign up for 60, 70, 80% travel. And ultimately, that's what the job calls for. So you can't do
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for touching on this nuance, because we didn't talk about travel, and I think that's a huge part of what it takes to to get work done. um,
Oh, absolutely.
if you could give one piece of advice that contradicts popular career advice guidance, what would it be?
Don't be greedy. Don't be greedy. Is this a position? Look at the offer holistically. Is this a company, technology, and actually, especially if this is not your last or your second last stop in your career, if you're still building your career, if you're in your late 20s, your 30s, your 40s, dare I say it, through your 50s, uh, is this a company that you want to be at? Is it giving you respectable compensation that's covering your Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Are you showing career progression in your own career? Um, Taking these massive jumps or thinking that I gotcha, like I took that company and I got the most I've ever gotten. They had no idea how. That's just very short sighted. And so um, you should be thinking about when you make career moves as an investment into your career story, equally as much as you are thinking about how it's being able to cover your bills and expenses and ultimately have income into your home. Every step that you make in your career, like for example, if you're interviewing for a position right now, you should be asking yourself the question, when I take this position, what is this doing for my career for the next move that I'm going to be making? So every time you're in an interview process and you're looking at jumping into that company, it's an
Yep.
investment into your career equally as much as it is the holistic picture of income and compensation. But if you're just looking at these, let me see how much I could take this company for, and if I can go from 150 to 210 on a base and make these massive jumps, and it's a very short-sighted move, and it's likely not going to work out.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Giovanni. To wrap up our conversation, I have a couple more questions. I want to maybe um, ask about any like favorite resources, books that have shaped the way you think. Something that you'd recommend people looking for jobs, maybe. It could be books, podcasts, you name it. Yeah, so maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So for me, one of the books, and I run a business, but it's called Vivid Vision, and
Mm,
a remarkable tool for aligning your business around a shared vision of the future. Uh,
Cameron, yeah.
it Yes, Cameron Harold, and that was an excellent book. So just the clarity of vision and how to go about writing a vivid vision for where you want to go, and it doesn't have to be running a company. It could be running your life. And actually, the last two chapters of that book, he actually talks about writing a vivid vision for your personal life. So having a clear vision and kind of manifesting where you want to go, and
Yeah.
also being able to take that story of your vision and make it scalable where you can share it with others and they can get on board with you, whether it's a support from whether it's family or employees or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So that was a very, very great book that I would strongly recommend. Um, I am a huge fan of the author Ryan Holiday. So my co-founder
Mm.
here at Lifeblood, Joseph Snyder, and I, we've fallen in love years ago with Ryan Holiday, who is tasked with basically revitalizing the philosophy of Stoicism. And his bookstore is actually in Bastrop, Texas, which is
Yeah,
about 40
it's
minutes east of Austin.
got it. Yeah, I was going to say it's in Texas near where you are. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm a little north of Houston. It's probably a solid 2 hour drive or less, actually, maybe about an hour and 40 minutes from where I'm at
Yep.
right now. I've been there a couple times, but the specific one is called Stillness is the Key. But
Mm.
he has a series of books that has been basically thematically picked off of the Meditations book that was written by Marcus Aurelius centuries ago, 2,000 years ago, which is an amazing book within itself. If no one's read Marcus Aurelius, it's basically the philosophical Bible that's analogous to the Bible of philosophy, that's founded on Stoicism. It's a phenomenal book if anyone wants to kind of read that kind of hard literature. But Ryan Holiday is my go-to guy for really great storytelling, insightful ambition and inspiration, and keeps me going.
Yeah, that's great. I love both those books that you shared. I think the Vivid Vision could totally, like, anybody could do it. You don't have to be a business owner to do it. Like you said, in the end of the book, Cameron talks about, how you can have a vivid vision for your life. And I've read a couple of Ryan's Holiday's books, Perennial Seller, I think that was what it was called. It was like, and then I think All Marketers Are Liars. I think it's been a while, but I think that's the one. But those are like lesser known books of his. I think people should definitely check out his website. I'll link it in the show notes, and then, be on his mailing list where he shares like books that he's reading every month. So I would encourage people to do that. That's great. Anything else you want to add to this book conversation?
Yeah, and actually I learned it from Ryan Holiday in his email blast that you were just alluding to, and he's mentioned it a couple times on his podcast as well, and I'm reading it. So I have two children. I have a son who's 4 years old, and I have a daughter who this month is going to be 17 months old. And so it is called The Outdoor... Actually, you know what? I'm going to look this up. Outdoor Kids in an Inside World. So I fell in love with the book that I completely forgot the title. But Ryan Holiday turned this on to me. We live in the Woodlands, Texas, so it's very natural to begin with. But I'm an outdoorsman. I go skiing, hiking, hunting, you name it. So I love the outdoors. But this whole past 20 years of people being absolutely glued to their phones and technology and television and all that stuff, there's books even written about it that have just talked about how it's actually changed how people think, the mentalities of children, all that kind of stuff that have grown up over the past 20 years. And so the book that I would recommend strongly for any parent listening in here is Outdoor Kids in an Inside World. The punchline is, get your kids outside as much as possible. Yep. That's about as punchy as I can get it, but he has an amazing amount of stories in there that are very, very cool, from, just holding your child's hand and walking outside in the backyard and going to find mushrooms and looking up what they mean and the bird calls. And it's just all these little things that enable a child's mind to just be opened up and learn about the bigger world that they live in, that shouldn't be only isolated to video games and TV TikTok. On the couch.
Yep, exactly.
And TikTok, yes.
Yep, I love it. Thank you for that. I think I just add, I like to know like who is like Ryan Holiday's guru. And I'll just tell people obviously he looks up to Robert Greene, and Robert Greene has published amazing books. So I would encourage people to check out Robert Greene's work as well. And then to wrap up, for people that are interested in working with you or knowing more about your company, where's the best place for them to connect with you and learn about Lifeblood?
The best place to connect with me and learn about Lifeblood. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. For everything that we just talked about, I actually have no social media except LinkedIn. So I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. I have been since pretty much it started, but I don't have any other social media elsewhere. So you can definitely reach me on LinkedIn. My name is Giovanni Lauricella. My email is very simple, giovanni@lifeblood.com, just how it sounds. And then lifeblood.com is where you can learn all about our company and what we do, which is we are a MedTech executive search firm for small and medium-sized medical device companies. And we've been doing this for nearly 20 years.
Great. Thank you so much, Giovanni, for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kunal. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Clinical Trial Podcast. For more exclusive clinical research content to get you to the top of your game, head on over to clinicaltrialpodcast.com.